My daughter said, "You eat after everyone else." And something cracked inside me. No rage, no shouting, just a slow, clean split like frost splitting an old branch. I looked down at the roast I had marinated for 5 hours and baked for 3 more. I looked at the table where the others sat, her husband, her children, their friends. Then I picked up the pan, still hot, foil crinkling under my fingertips, and I walked out the front door. No one followed me. Not a breath, not a protest. Just the dull scrape of forks on porcelain, and the high laughter of children too young to understand the moment that had just passed. The air outside was colder than I expected. It helped. The roast was heavy, juices still bubbling faintly at the bottom. But I didn't stop. I carried it 3 blocks to my own house, steady and careful. Inside, the air smelled of lemon soap and dust. My house hadn't been truly mine since Margaret convinced me to move into her home last year. "It'll be easier," she had said. "You won't have to worry about bills. We'll take care of you." I should have known better. Nothing is free in this world, not even your dignity. I set the roast on my counter. Silence wrapped around me like an old coat. No voices, no televisions blaring. No one asking what cinnamon was or why the potatoes were lumpy. Just me and the steady tick of a clock I hadn't wound in weeks. I made myself a plate, one of the old ones with faded blue flowers around the rim, chipped at the edge. I carved a thick slice, spooned on a bit of pan juice, and sat down. I ate slowly. The meat was tender, the seasoning perfect. Maybe it was the best roast I had ever cooked. No one complimented me. No one interrupted me. For the first time in years, I tasted every bite. When I finished, I washed the plate, dried it, and set it away. Then I sat at the window and watched the maple trees sway in the wind. I had raked those leaves every autumn. Now Margaret said it was too dangerous, that I might fall, that I could break my hip, but she never asked if I wanted to. She just told me. Her voice still echoed in my ears. "You eat after everyone else." As if I were staff. As if decades of work, of raising her, of standing by her mother's side, of keeping the lights on and the roof steady, meant nothing. The truth was, I'd been expecting this day. All it took was one sentence to make it plain. I sat at that window for a long time, thinking of all the times I stayed quiet. The times I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. The time she snapped at me in front of her husband. The way she rolled her eyes when I asked how to use the new dishwasher. The way she told me not to wear certain clothes to gatherings because they were old-fashioned. The way she reminded me, you need to start planning for the end. Like I was a rotten piece of fruit expiring on her counter. I thought of my other daughter, Emily, gone now for 10 years. She was a gentle one. The one who brought me tea when my arthritis flared. The one who called every week just to chat. The one who smiled with her eyes. She left behind her daughter, my granddaughter, Rachel. Sweet, watchful Rachel. She would be grown by now. Grown enough to see through family masks. I wonder what she would think if she saw me walking away with that roast. Then I thought of myself, the man I used to be, and the man I had become. Not bitter, not angry, just tired. Tired of living in someone else's house. Tired of being treated like an obligation. Tired pretending that being tolerated was the same as being loved. I stood up, walked to the pantry, and pulled out a pen and an old notebook. There are things I needed to do, not just today, but soon. My name was still on the deed of this house. My savings were still in my account. The lights still turned on for me. I had simply forgotten to notice. The sun dipped low, and the streetlights flickered awake. Somewhere, Margaret was realizing the roast was gone. Maybe someone finally asked where I was. Maybe not. It didn't matter. Tonight, I would sleep in my own bed, eat my own food, and answer to no one. The phone rang twice that night. I didn't answer. I let her name flash on the screen and fade away. She didn't leave a message. Just called, as if the sound alone could reel me back. But it didn't. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Sleep didn't come from peace, but from the exhaustion of carrying silence for too long and finally letting it go. I woke with the first light. As always, though I had no children to dress, no work to rush to, no breakfast to cook for people who never looked up from their phones. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and a slice of cold roast, which was somehow even better the next morning. I didn't reheat it. I didn't fuss. I just ate it as it was, slowly, quietly, while the house breathed around me. By 8 o'clock, I had written a list, checked my accounts, called an attorney, pulled out the papers Margaret had helped organize last spring. The list was short, but it was mine. I opened the old file labeled House and Finances. Inside were receipts from repairs I'd paid for, utility bills always in Margaret's name, little notes she had slipped in. We should sort this. Let's consolidate that. All neat suggestions that somehow shifted control away from me, inch by inch. I remember when she convinced me to add her to one of my checking accounts, just in case of emergencies. I thought I was being practical. That's how they get you, isn't it? They don't take everything at once. They nibble. They peel pieces away until you don't recognize what's yours anymore. I logged into my bank for the first time in years, reset the password, answered security questions. There it was. My balance. Still intact. Still mine. I wrote down in bold letters. Visit bank in person. Remove all joint access. Only my name. My signature. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. As I looked up, my eyes fell on a photograph on the fridge. One of the few I hadn't hidden away. Emily and I, standing in the garden with Rachel between us, no older than 7. Her hands full of basil she'd pulled from the planter. We were laughing, real laughter, not posed. That sound, I hadn't heard it in years. Without thinking, I picked up the phone and dialed Rachel's number. I didn't even need to check the book. It was still carved into memory. It rang twice before she answered. Grandpa. Her voice hit me like sunlight. Hi, sweetheart. A pause. Then, are you okay? Mom said. She hesitated. She said you left last night. She didn't say much, but she looked furious. I figured something happened. I smiled, though my throat tightened. Something did happen. I remembered I'm still alive. There was a pause on her end, then a small laugh. Well, that's one way to put it. I walked out, Rachel, took the roast I cooked and walked right out. Another pause. No judgment. Just a slow exhale. Good, she said softly. Good for you. I swallowed. Would you like to come by sometime? I'll make lunch. Nothing fancy. Tomorrow, she answered quickly. If that's okay. Tomorrow would be perfect. When we hung up, I walked slowly around the house. Really looked at it. The curtains I had hung before Margaret was even born. The chipped ceramic lamp I'd refused to replace. The bookshelf full of paperbacks nobody had borrowed in decades. Everything had its place. Everything had weight. I dusted. I polished. I opened the windows. The house breathed with me. At noon, I stepped into the backyard. The soil was dry but not hopeless. Parsley still clung on. A few stubborn marigolds drooped their yellow heads. I touched the wooden frame of the bed and let my hand rest there. Margaret had told me not to bother with the garden anymore. It's too much for you, Dad. Just let it go. She didn't understand. You don't let go of the things that remind you who you are. You water them, even if your hands shake, even if your knees ache, even if nobody else notices. The phone didn't ring again that day, and that was fine. Emily once told me I was the strongest man she knew. She said it when I fixed the washing machine alone, when I held her mother's hand as she took her last breath, when I went back to work 3 days after the funeral because someone had to keep the lights on. Funny how that strength fades into invisibility with age. You stop being the man who carried the family and become the man they talk about, the one they pat on the hand, the one they tell to rest, to sit, to stay out of the way. But I wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. The next morning, the sun was sharp, slicing through my curtains like it had something to prove. I hadn't slept this long in years, yet when I woke, there was a tightness in my chest, not from fear, but from a memory of Margaret's voice. You eat after everyone else. For words, small enough to whisper, sharp enough to cut a man open. I boiled water for tea, the kettle rattling like a nervous hand. When it screamed, I pulled it off and poured. I drank too quickly and burned my tongue, but I welcomed the sting. It reminded me I could still feel. The phone rang before I had finished half the cup. Her name, bright and sharp across the screen, Margaret. I let it ring until it cut off. 2 minutes later, it rang again. I answered. Dad, she said without greeting. Her tone was clipped, a whip cracking in the cold. What the hell was that last night? What was what? My voice was calm, almost too calm. I stirred my tea, though there was nothing left to dissolve. You walked out. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how that made me look? I laughed once, low and dry. I suppose it made you look the way you treat me. She sucked in a breath. That little gasp, like someone slapped her without lifting a hand. You're being ridiculous. Am I? You know I've done everything for you. You live under my roof. You don't pay a dime for groceries or electricity or... I cut her off. That's a lie. I paid every bill last winter, Margaret. Every single one. Your husband handed them to me, remember? Said you were short after the holidays. You promised you'd pay me back. You never did. Silence. Then a scoff. You're keeping tabs now? Really? I'm keeping track of my life, yes. Her voice sharpened. You can't just storm out like that. People noticed. People talk. Do you want them to think we don't take care of you? They'd be right, I said flatly. Another silence. Then quieter, almost hissing. Don't you dare start this again. I didn't answer. I hung up. The quiet afterward wasn't peaceful. It rang in my ears, a hollow echo where her voice had been. I set my phone face down on the table. My tea had gone cold. That afternoon, I sat in my living room and let memory have its way with me. I remembered Margaret at 12, slamming doors, calling her mother names I can't bear to repeat. I remembered telling her to apologize, the way she sneered and said, she'll forgive me. She always does. I remembered her at 16, borrowing the car without permission, crashing it into a mailbox. I paid the fine. I fixed the bumper myself in the driveway. She never thanked me. At 22, she married a man I didn't trust. His handshake was too weak, his smile too wide. But her mother told me to hold my tongue. She needs to make her own mistakes, she said. And so I did. Then came the years of distance. The phone calls that grew shorter. The birthdays forgotten. The time she needed money, always in the name of emergencies. The way she spoke to me at Christmas dinners, half polite, half patronizing, as if she were tolerating some embarrassing uncle instead of her own father. And yet, when her mother fell ill, I was the one who never left the hospital. I held her mother's hand while Margaret breathed in once a week with excuses about work, about the children, about her husband's schedule. I was the one who closed my wife's eyes when she passed. I was the one who stood at the funeral with my back straight, while Margaret wept loud enough for everyone to hear, but never once looked at me. She moved me into her house a year later. You shouldn't be alone, she said. It's not safe. What she meant was, you're easier to control if I can see you. At first, it was small things. She reorganized my clothes. She corrected how I folded towels. She reminded me daily to take my pills. Then she told me which pills I didn't need anymore because they were too expensive. She started opening my mail. At first, I didn't notice. Then one day, a letter from the bank was already torn open. When I asked, she laughed, said she thought it was for her husband. That was the first time I felt the frost crawl up my spine. And yet I stayed quiet. For peace. Always for peace. Until last night, the phone rang again at dusk. This time it wasn't Margaret. It was Rachel. Grandpa. Her voice was softer than her mother's had ever been. Yes, sweetheart. Mom's. She's furious. She said you're being ungrateful, that you embarrassed her. I closed my eyes. Did she tell you what she said to me? No, Rachel whispered. She never does, but I can guess. I've seen the way she talks to you. Something inside me cracked, but it wasn't weakness. It was relief. To be seen, even by one person, after so many years of invisibility. Rachel, I said, my voice trembling, promise me something. Promise me you'll never let her rewrite me in your mind. Promise me you'll remember who I really am. I already do, she said simply. I pressed the phone to my ear until it hurt. For the first time in years, I felt the burn of tears I didn't want to swallow back. That night, Margaret came to my house. I didn't invite her. She had a key. I woke to the sound of the door opening, the heavy slam, the click of her heels on the tile. I stayed in bed. Dad, she barked, we need to talk. I didn't move. She stormed down the hall, opened my bedroom door without knocking. This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Slowly I sat up. My joints groaned, but my voice was steady. Get out of my house. She blinked. For a second, she looked like the 12-year-old girl who used to get caught lying. Then her lips curled. This isn't just your house. You've let me handle all the paperwork. You signed things over to me. Don't you remember? A chill ran through me. My hands tightened on the blanket. I remember signing nothing of the sort. She smirked. Maybe you don't remember. Maybe you're getting forgetful. It happens at your age. Her words hit me harder than any slap. That casual cruelty, the way she weaponized time itself against me. I stood, slow but deliberate. Get out. Her smile faltered. She stepped back. Dad, out. My voice cracked like thunder in the small room. She left, but not before saying, cold and flat, "You're making a mistake. You can't do this on your own." When the door slammed behind her, I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking, not with fear, but with fury. The kind of fury that builds for decades, buried under silence, until one day it finally breaks the surface. I realized then, she wasn't just dismissing me. She was trying to erase me, and I wasn't going to let her. The following morning, I woke with the weight of last night's confrontation still pressing on my chest, but it felt different now. Not just a bruise, something else beneath it, something alive. I brewed my tea slowly, letting the steam rise and wrap itself around me. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon and old wood. I caught myself humming, a tune I hadn't realized was still lodged in my bones. It was the same song my wife used to hum while hanging laundry outside, her hands moving with quiet grace. For a moment, the kitchen wasn't empty. She was there at the counter, rolling dough with flour on her cheek, looking up at me with that half smile she always had when she caught me staring too long. I felt my throat tighten, but not from sorrow, from warmth, from remembering that I had once been loved so wholly, so unashamedly. The knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find Rachel, her hair loose, her face bright despite the early hour. She was holding a paper bag that smelled of cinnamon. "Grandpa," she said softly, "I brought breakfast." Inside, we sat at the little table. She unpacked pastries and poured juice into mismatched glasses. For a while, we didn't speak much, just ate. The silence wasn't heavy. It was a kind of silence that feels safe, the kind that says, "I'm here, you're here, that's enough." Finally, she looked up. "I couldn't sleep last night. I kept thinking about you. About how Mom—" She trailed off, then shook her head. "She doesn't deserve to treat you the way she does." I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. "Rachel, don't let my battles become your burden. You're too young to carry this weight." She squeezed my hand, her eyes suddenly fierce. "I'm not carrying it, Grandpa. I'm standing beside you. There's a difference." I stared at her, this girl who looked so much like her grandmother when she was young. Same determination in her eyes, same quiet fire. For the first time in so many years, I felt like I wasn't alone in the fight. That afternoon, we walked in the garden. My knees complained, but Rachel slowed her steps to match mine. The air was crisp, filled with the faint sweetness of the last roses clinging stubbornly to their stems. "Grandma loved this garden," she said, brushing her fingers over a wilted bloom. "She did." I nodded. She said flowers were proof that beauty doesn't need to last forever to matter. Rachel smiled. That sounded like her. We paused at the old oak bench, weathered and cracked, but still standing. I lowered myself onto it, exhaling. "We used to sit here for hours, your grandmother and I. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we wouldn't. Didn't matter. Being beside her was enough." Rachel sat next to me. "Do you miss her every day?" "Every breath," I admitted, but sometimes I think she's still here, in the way the wind moves through these trees, in the way you smile, in the stubbornness you inherited. She laughed softly, leaning her head against my shoulder. "I like to think she's proud of you." The words landed in me like sunlight through clouds. Proud. It had been so long since anyone said that to me. Later, we went back inside. Rachel insisted on helping me tidy up the living room. She dusted shelves, humming under her breath. At one point, she picked up an old photo frame. It was me and her grandmother, taken decades ago at the beach. My wife's hair was wild from the wind, my arms around her, both of us laughing like fools. Rachel held the picture close. "You look so happy here." "We were," I said. My voice cracked a little, but I didn't hide it. She placed the photo carefully back on the shelf, then turned to me. "Grandpa, you've given so much to this family. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." I couldn't answer. My throat was too tight. But in that moment, I knew, no matter what Margaret tried to take from me, she couldn't erase the truth of who I'd been, who I still was. Evening fell gently. Rachel made tea while I sat in my chair, the television humming softly in the background. She brought me the cup and sat cross-legged on the rug like she used it as a little girl. "Tell me a story," she said suddenly. I chuckled. "What kind of story?" "Any story. About you, about Grandma, about when Mom was little." I hesitated. Memories swirled, some bitter, some sweet. I chose one of the sweeter ones. "When your mother was about your age, we went camping. Just the three of us. Your grandmother loved the woods. Margaret didn't. I smiled faintly. She hated the bugs, the dirt, the cold. But one night, we sat around the fire and I roasted marshmallows. She burned hers completely black. But she ate it anyway. She laughed so hard, she nearly fell backward into the fire pit. For that one night, she was just a kid, carefree. Your grandmother and I, we never forgot it. Rachel's eyes softened. I wish I could have seen her like that. I nodded slowly. She had light in her once. She just lost her way. We sat quietly after that, sipping tea. The room felt full, not empty, even though there were only two of us. When Rachel left later that night, she hugged me tight at the door. I'll come back tomorrow, okay? Don't let Mom get to you. I held her a moment longer, memorizing the feel of her arms around me. You are your grandmother's granddaughter. I whispered. She smiled, eyes bright. I know. After she left, I stood in the silence of my home, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like mine. But just as I was settling into bed, the phone rang. The name on the screen, Margaret. I didn't answer. Not yet, but I knew this wasn't over. And somehow, that didn't scare me anymore. The phone call from Margaret the previous night had lingered in my mind like a bitter taste. I hadn't answered, and for once, I didn't feel guilty. Still, I knew it was only a matter of time before she came knocking again. Margaret didn't let go of control easily. She had spent too many years tightening her grip. It happened the very next afternoon. A sharp knock rattled my door. Not a gentle, "Hello, Father, may I come in?" Knock. A demand. A summons. I opened it to find her standing there, impeccably dressed, a stack of papers clutched in her hands. She pushed past me before I could invite her inside. "Father," she said briskly, "we need to discuss some important matters. It can't wait." I watched her march into my living room as though it belonged to her. She set the papers on my coffee table with a slap. My chest tightened. I already knew this wasn't going to be about kindness or family or reconciliation. "What's all this?" I asked cautiously, lowering myself into my chair. "Necessary paperwork," Margaret replied. Her tone was sharp, rehearsed. "Things we should have dealt with months ago. Legal documents. Power of attorney adjustments. Estate planning. You're not getting any younger, Father, and it's irresponsible to leave things the way they are." I stared at her. "Estate planning," I repeated. "Yes," she said, flipping through pages with manicured fingers. "It's standard. Given your condition, we need to ensure everything is in order." "My condition?" She gave a thin smile. "Your memory lapses. Your confusion. Rachel told me you've been forgetting things. We both know it's only going to get worse. Better prepare now, while you still have capacity to sign." Her words cut like glass. The insinuation was clear. She was painting me as feeble and incompetent, on the verge of dementia. "Margaret," I said slowly, "my mind is not gone." She waved a hand dismissively. "Father, denial won't help anyone. I'm trying to protect you. And frankly, protect this family from the chaos that will come if you don't do the responsible thing." Her eyes burned into mine. Cold, calculating. I didn't answer right away. My fingers trembled slightly on the armrest of my chair. Years ago, I would cave immediately, ashamed, convinced she knew best. But something inside me had changed. Rachel's voice echoed in my mind. "I'm not carrying your burden. I'm standing beside you." I swallowed hard. "Leave the papers here," I said quietly. "I'll look them over." She narrowed her eyes. "They need to be signed today." "No," I said, my voice firm, stronger than I expected. "I'll read them in my own time." Margaret's lips thinned into a line. "If you delay, Father, it may be too late. You don't want people questioning your competency later. You don't want this dragged into court." Something in me snapped. I leaned forward, my voice rough. "Enough." I said, "I'll look them over. That's final." Her nostrils flared, but she gathered her composure. She tapped the papers into a neat stack, left them on the table, and stood. "Fine," she said coolly, "but don't wait too long. The world won't wait for you to make up your mind." She walked to the door without another word, heels striking hard against the floor. The slam reverberated through the house long after she'd gone. I sat in silence, staring at the pile of documents on my coffee table. The air felt heavy. What was she really trying to get me to sign? My hands itched with unease. As I sat there, the doorbell rang again. I groaned, expecting Margaret's return. But when I opened the door, I found Mr. Collins, my next-door neighbor, standing there. He was a stout man in his 70s, always wearing the same flat cap and tweed jacket. His face was lined with years, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "Afternoon," he said, peering at me with mild concern. "I couldn't help but notice your daughter storming out just now. Everything all right?" I hesitated. "She left me some papers. Wants me to sign them. Legal things." His brow furrowed. "Mind if I take a look? You know I practiced law for 30-odd years before retiring." I blinked. I had nearly forgotten. Collins had once been a lawyer. A damn good one, if I remember correctly. "Please," I said, stepping aside. He followed me in, sat on the sofa, and pulled the stack toward him. He put on his reading glasses, flipping through page after page. His silence grew heavier with each turn. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "Good Lord." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" Collins set the papers down, his jaw clenched. "These aren't just standard estate documents. This is a full transfer of power of attorney to your daughter, effective immediately. Once you sign this, she'll have complete legal control over your finances, your medical decisions, even this house. You'd essentially be handing your life over to her." The room seemed to tilt. She told me it was just planning. I whispered. Collins shook his head grimly. "It's more than that. It's coercion, plain and simple. And given your age, if she presents this in court later, she could argue you weren't a sound mind when you signed. That would hold up. I've seen it happen." I pressed a hand to my chest, my breath uneven. Rage bubbled up, mixed with something else. Betrayal. "All these years," I murmured. "I trusted her, and she's been waiting for me to weaken, to take everything." Collins leaned forward, his voice steady. "Then you cannot, under any circumstances, sign these, and we'll need to do more than that. We'll need to protect your interests legally. I can help." For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. Over the next week, Collins became my shield. He reviewed old financial statements, asked pointed questions, and uncovered patterns I had overlooked. Strange withdrawals. Transfers I didn't remember authorizing. Subtle but consistent. "She's been siphoning funds," he explained one evening, his voice tight. "Not huge sums at once, but steady. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Over years, it adds up." My hands shook as I held the bank records. "My own daughter," I whispered, "stealing from me." Rachel visited often during this time, sitting quietly as Collins laid out the evidence. I saw the fury in her eyes, but also the sadness. "She's been planning this for years," Collins said grimly. "But she didn't count on you having allies." The confrontation came sooner than I expected. Margaret returned one afternoon, striding in as if she owned the place. She noticed Collins immediately, sitting across from me with the document spread out. Her eyes narrowed. "What's he doing here?" I straightened in my chair. My voice didn't tremble. "He's helping me. He's a lawyer." Margaret's composure faltered for a second, then hardened. "Father, this is a family matter. Outsiders have no place here." "Outsiders?" Collins barked. "I live next door, and I've seen enough of these so-called family matters to know when someone's being manipulated." Margaret turned on me, her tone sharp. "Father, you can't trust him. He'll confuse you. You don't need his interference." I met her gaze squarely. For the first time in years, I didn't look away. "No, Margaret," I said firmly. "What I don't need is you stealing from me." Her face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" Collins slid a folder across the table. "We found the records, the withdrawals, the transfers. Care to explain?" Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. She stammered. I was just helping, managing his finances. He's not capable anymore." I slammed my hand on the armrest. The sound startled even me. "Enough! I am not your puppet. I am not your possession. You will not take my home. You will not drain my accounts. You will not erase me while I still breathe." The silence that followed was thick, electric. Margaret's eyes darted between us, her mask of control cracking. "Father," she hissed, her voice low, almost trembling, "you're making a mistake." "No," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "For the first time in years, I'm not." She stood abruptly, gathering her purse. "You'll regret this," she snapped. "Both of you." The slam of the door echoed again, but this time I didn't feel powerless. I felt alive. Collins looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Well done," he said. "You've drawn the line. And now, we make sure she can't cross it again. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding but steady. For the first time in a long, long time, I believed him. The day began gray and still. A strange tension hung over the house, heavier than any winter fog. I knew Margaret would not let the week pass without making her move. I had expected her storming in, snapping orders, pressing for signatures. But today, she had something more elaborate in mind, a family gathering. I woke to the low hum of the radiator and the soft patter of rain against the windows. Rachel was already there, bustling around the kitchen, her presence a quiet anchor. She brought me tea, and I watched her small, careful gestures, feeling an almost forgotten warmth. She said it's just a meeting, Rachel said cautiously, but I think she wants to make a spectacle. I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. My hands felt strong, steady. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. By late afternoon, the house had filled with relatives, distant cousins, aunts, uncles, all of them oblivious of the tension that simmered beneath polite smiles and tepid hellos. Margaret moved among them with practiced grace, her sharp eyes scanning for allies, subtle gestures commanding attention. "Father," she said, approaching me with that same cold, calm tone, "thank you for agreeing to host. We just want to ensure everything is in order, nothing more." I looked at her, and something inside me solidified. "Margaret," I said, steady and clear, "we are here to talk, yes, but I will not be intimidated." She blinked, momentarily thrown. The room seemed to sense it. Murmurs rippled, as if the air itself recognized a shift. Collins was at my side, calm and precise. He gave a subtle nod, as if to say, "It's time." Margaret gestured to the papers she had brought. "These documents ensure your safety, Father. They're standard." I felt a flicker of anger. "Standard?" I repeated, "I've seen these before. You've been plotting for years." Gasps spread through the room. Margaret's composure cracked for the briefest of seconds. Collins stepped forward, placing the stack of evidence in front of everyone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "these are not merely legal documents. They're a series of manipulations, financial, emotional, and legal, designed to transfer full control of this man's life and property to one person. The attempts are ongoing and documented." The room went silent. Faces froze, some blanching, some wide-eyed. Margaret's lips parted, then closed. She had not anticipated this level of exposure. This isn't true," she stammered, her voice rising. I stood, feeling the weight of years pressing into me but refusing to bend. "It is true," I said, my voice loud, unwavering. "You have spent decades treating me as a means to your ambitions. Stealing from me, controlling me, erasing me. Not anymore." A cousin whispered, "I had no idea." Another aunt gasped, "I always thought she was helping." I shook my head. "Helping? This is theft. This is betrayal. This is not family." Margaret's face twisted with rage, then despair. She lunged forward, trying to regain control. "Father, you can't. These are legal documents. You don't understand." I stepped forward, calm but resolute. "I understand perfectly, and I will not sign. I will not be bullied. I will not be erased." Rachel stood beside me now, her hand resting lightly on mine. "Grandpa," she said softly, "we're with you. You don't have to face this alone." The warmth of her support filled me, reinforcing the steel inside. I looked around at the relatives. Some stared in shock, some in disbelief, but no one moved against me. Margaret's eyes burned with a mix of fear and fury. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice cracking. "No," I said firmly. "You will regret underestimating me, underestimating what it means to be a father, a grandfather, and a human being. This house, these accounts, my life, they are mine, and I choose who remains part of them." Collins added, "We will be filing a formal legal challenge, ensuring that your assets and home remain protected. She cannot touch them without consent and oversight. Everything you've built stays with you." Margaret's shoulders slumped slightly, her fight drained by the undeniable truth. She turned on her heel and left the house in a storm of angry silence. The door slammed behind her, echoing like a punctuation mark to a chapter long in the making. The room was quiet after she left. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a cousin tentatively said, "I didn't realize." I smiled faintly, shaking my head. "Now you do, and now we move forward. Together." Rachel hugged me, her small arms grounding me. "You did it, Grandpa." You stood up. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. We did it, I corrected gently. All of us who care about truth and family. Collins patted my shoulder. Sometimes the strongest defense is standing up for yourself. You've done more than that. You reclaimed your life. I felt the house breathe differently. The weight of years of subjugation lifted. I walked to the window, looking at the maples swaying in the wind. I remembered the first times I had raked their leaves, the summers with Grace and Rachel, the laughter, the moments of pure life before the shadows crept in. For the first time in decades, I felt unburdened. The following weeks were calmer. Margaret no longer intruded. The legal paperwork was processed with Colin's guidance, ensuring my independence. Rachel visited often, helping with small chores, but mostly just being there. The house felt alive again, not as a prison, but as a home. I spent evenings in my chair, tea in hand, the old blue-edged plate before me. I savored every bite, not because of the food itself, but because it symbolized something larger. Choice, control, dignity. The sun set low over the rooftops, casting long shadows across the floor. I let the light linger on my hands, on the papers that had once threatened my autonomy. They now lay secured, inert, powerless. I thought of Grace, of Rachel, of all the moments that had led to this day, and I felt gratitude, deep and unwavering. Life had given me pain, betrayal, loss, but it had also given me clarity, courage, and a second chance. No longer would I bend to the will of those who sought to diminish me. No longer would I remain silent in the face of injustice. I was free, and for the first time in years, I smiled, not the polite, subdued smile I had offered the world before, but a full, unrestrained smile, a smile that carried every ounce of experience, every scar, every lesson. I looked at Rachel, her bright eyes reflecting mine, and said quietly, "We've done it, haven't we?" "Yes, Grandpa," she whispered. "We really have." And with that, the house settled into its new rhythm, one built not on fear or control, but on truth, respect, and love. The past would remain as all pasts do, but it no longer defined me. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready. For the first time in decades, I felt whole. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with memory. I walked through the rooms, noticing details I had long ignored. The chipped lamp in the corner, the faded curtains I had sewn decades ago, the books on the shelf that had never been borrowed. Every item carried its own weight, every shadow its own story. I sat in my old chair by the window, tea in hand, and watched the sunlight scatter across the floorboards. It warmed my hands and reminded me that life, even after betrayal and years of silent suffering, still had moments of gentle grace. I thought of Grace, of Rachel, of the mornings when the house was filled with laughter, when the smell of bread baking and coffee brewing signaled warmth and belonging. Those days had faded into years of manipulation, compromise, and quiet submission. Margaret had tried to erase me, to make me invisible, to convince me that my dignity, my independence, my very life was secondary. But she had failed. Now, I had reclaimed it all. Rachel sat across from me, coloring in a sketchbook. She had inherited her mother's sharp mind, but Grace's warmth, a combination that made her perceptive beyond her years. "Grandpa," she said without looking up, "I think the house is happier now." I chuckled softly. "Yes, it is. And so are we." We didn't speak much. Words weren't necessary. There was understanding in silence, the shared acknowledgement of battles fought and won. Rachel poured herself a cup of tea, and we drank quietly, the steam rising between us like a small celebration of our survival. The legal matters had been settled, thanks to Colin's meticulous work. Every document verified, every account secured. Margaret had no access, no leverage, no hold over my life. And yet, I didn't feel triumph at her defeat. I felt peace in my own reclamation. Power was not what mattered. It was clarity, autonomy, the ability to make choices uncoerced. I wandered into garden, running my hands over the raised beds. Parsley still clung stubbornly to the soil. A few calendula blooms lifted their heads toward the waning sun. These plants had survived neglect, frost, and my intermittent attention. They flourished anyway. And so I thought, did I? The garden was more than soil and leaves. It was a metaphor, a testament to resilience. Life bends, it snaps, it bruises, but it also endures. I tended the plants carefully, my fingers gentle but sure. Every touch reminded me of the years I had given, the care I had poured into a family that hadn't always reciprocated, and now the care I could give to myself. Evenings were long and quiet, but not lonely. I had rediscovered the joy of small routines. Making tea, reading old books, listening to the wind in the trees, writing notes to Rachel and Grace. I called Collins occasionally, not for legal advice, but to share stories, to laugh at absurdities, to feel connected to someone who understood the weight of betrayal and the beauty of reclamation. I reconnected with old friends too, those I had drifted from during the years of submission and compromise. Letters turned into calls, calls into visits. The world felt wider, richer, and full of possibility. And I realized something profound. Freedom was not merely the absence of interference. It was a presence of choice. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the window, Rachel and I baked bread together. Flour dusted the counter, clung to our hands, and in that simple domestic act, I felt a profound connection to life itself. I thought of Grace, who had nurtured Rachel in ways I could not, and I felt gratitude, not bitterness, not anger, just gratitude. We laughed when those stuck stubbornly to the counter. We argued playfully about kneading technique. The smell of baking filled the house, mingling with the scent of rain through the open window. It was ordinary, it was perfect, and it was ours. I thought back to the moments before my defiance, to the dinners when Margaret's cold voice told me to wait until everyone else had eaten. The humiliation, the isolation, the subtle erasure of my dignity. And I smiled because those days were over. I had taken back not only my home but my soul. Winter came slowly, blanketing the neighborhood in white. The house glowed warmly against the cold. I sat by the fireplace, listening to the crackle of wood, the quiet of a world that had been chaotic and cruel, now gentle and forgiving. Rachel did her homework nearby, her presence accompanying rhythm. I wrote letters to distant family members, clarifying my wishes and sharing memories. I wrote to friends long forgotten. I wrote to Grace's memory, expressing love and gratitude for the daughter I had lost, but whose spirit still lived in Rachel. Writing became a ritual, a meditation, a connection to both past and future. I realized that life's true wealth is not measured in money or property, though those are useful. It is measured in dignity, in love freely given and freely received, in the ability to claim one's space in the world without fear. In spring, I planted new flowers in the garden, vibrant and defiant against the harshness of winter. I tended to them carefully, remembering how life always found a way to bloom. Rachel joined me, her small hands patting soil around seedlings. I watched her and felt an overwhelming sense of continuity. The garden was ours, the house was ours, and our hearts were ours. I visited the town occasionally, walking slowly down familiar streets. People greeted me, some recognizing me from decades past. Their warmth reminded me that life is also about community, about shared histories and invisible threads that bind us together. I had been isolated, yes, but never truly alone. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the floor, I sat in my chair and closed my eyes. Memories came, laughter, tears, battles fought in silence, moment of triumph, and moments of surrender. I let them wash over me without fear or judgment. Each one had its place in the story of my life. I opened my eyes to Rachel's bright face. "Grandpa, look," she exclaimed, showing me a drawing of the house, the garden, and a small figure standing proudly at the door. It was her interpretation of our life now. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, not from sorrow but from awe at the resilience and love captured in a child's hand. "Yes, Rachel," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is us. This is home." Time passed, quietly but meaningfully. I celebrated small victories. Fixing a leaking faucet, perfecting a new bread recipe, learning a new skill I had once thought beyond me. I celebrated larger victories, too, attending Rachel's school performances, reconnecting with distant friends, and watching her grow into a thoughtful, compassionate young woman. I realized that my life had come full circle. I had been diminished, ignored, manipulated, and yet here I was, stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected to things that truly mattered. The past had shaped me, but did not define me. I had taken a roast and walked away. I had reclaimed my space, my dignity, and my life. And now, in the gentle quiet of my home, surrounded by love, warmth, and memory, I felt whole. The sun set over the rooftops, bathing the house in golden light. I sipped my tea, savoring the moment. I thought of all the battles fought, the tears shed, the laughter shared. And I smiled a full, unrestrained smile, knowing that I lived, truly lived, and that I would continue to do so with clarity, courage, and love. Life, after all, was not about waiting to be served. It was about claiming every bite, every breath, every moment. And for the first time in decades, I had done just that. My daughter told me, "You eat after everyone else." and something inside me finally snapped. I took the roast I had spent hours preparing, and I walked away. For the first time in years, I ate alone, slowly, quietly, savoring every bite. I reclaimed my dignity, my life, my freedom. And as I watched the sun set over my garden, I realized sometimes all it takes is one step to take back what's yours. If you want to hear more stories of courage, resilience, and unexpected twists, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You never know whose life will inspire you next.